Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Creator channel. I'm Vladislav Zhirinovsky, and with us today we have Christina Cuffari, who is a Director of Sales and Technology at Prudential. Christina works very closely with financial professionals and their clients in terms of offering comments and the ways to protect yourselves in today's environment with cybersecurity being prevalent issue in everyone's mind, right? So let me share just a couple of things with you. So having been a banker for many, many years, I speak the language, I understand how things work. And 2 months ago, my personal accounts were somehow compromised. And that were data breaches that took place in recent years through various companies, right? Amazon had data breach, Equifax had data breach, then various mortgage companies had various data breaches. So the approach to kind of cybersecurity for yourself, and I'll definitely have Christina talk about it in greater detail, is just assume that your information is out there and your job is to protect yourself. So kind of, if you will, someone has the keys to your house, you don't know who, but there's a way you can protect yourself in your own home, right? So this is precisely why we decided to put together cybersecurity webinar. And I do want to share with you as well that at Craner, we made a point to truly create a cybersecurity protocol that we have in place for Craner to safeguard your information, and also for every single one of you to know what steps to take in order to protect yourself. For example, getting hold of credit report companies and freezing your credit report so there's no one can access that information without you being aware how to do it. So please know this. We know what to do. We know how to protect you on our end. We're happy to share the information with you. Please reach out after this call. We'll be happy to physically share with you our data breach security protocol in place. And I can assure you that your investment accounts are protected in a different way than your bank accounts. The number of the process to authenticate yourself and in order to physically get into your personal account is pretty rigorous. And then on top of it, for somebody, even if they somehow possess the information, for them to be able to get in and do something without us physically being aware of this is slim to none. So rest assured regarding that. So without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Christina Cuffari, and we're delighted to have her with us. Enjoy.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We appreciate you, of course, dedicating some time to education. And as we mentioned, this presentation was really designed specifically for clients. We really wanted to be able to educate clients on all of the different things that they need to be aware of as you are trying to protect yourself against your identity. And before we get in, actually, Vlad, I think I did make a mistake when it says, when I'm trying to share, it said, I still am a participant. So I do think I need to be upgraded. Genius, here we go. All right. So what we really wanted to do in our travels with advisors was to really be able to educate clients on all of the different questions, all of the different places, all of the different scams that they need to be aware of in order to truly protect their own information. And so one of the things that we know as it pertains to identity theft specifically is that there's really not a tremendous amount of education available. And there's not really a one-stop shop for you to go to be able to get all of the information you need. And that's really what we were trying to accomplish with this presentation. We wanted to be able to give you all of the information that you needed in order to be able to protect your own information. And with that, everything that we're going to talk about here today are going to be things that you can immediately implement into your day-to-day. So these are going to be things outside of what your financial institutions are doing to protect your information. These are things that as an individual, as a consumer, you must be doing in order to make sure that your information is not easy to be compromised. And so with that, we're going to talk about a whole spectrum of items here today. We're going to go through a number of different tricks and scams and ways that criminals are able to get their hands on our information, in hopes that simply just being educated about some of these scams can help you avoid them yourself. And we're going to go through three main things. First, we're going to go through all of the different accounts that you need to be in the know about, right? If you just knew about them, if you just were watching them, if you had a little bit more information, you would have the ability to protect yourself. Then we'll talk about how, or the different types of accounts you need to be monitoring, and the different ways and the different ways that you can monitor those accounts on a regular basis. And we'll give you the time frames for each of them as well. And then lastly, how to defend against identity theft. If you did everything that we talked about here today, but your information was still compromised, where can you go? What can you do? How can you mitigate those losses and get back to where you started as quickly as possible? So with that, let's jump in and let's talk about identity theft and some of the numbers, some of the statistics associated with it. In 2020, CNBC told us that identity theft cost Americans $56 billion. These are real numbers, right? I feel like once you start looking at numbers this big, it almost seems fake. But the reality is that these are real clients, real consumers, real people that are losing on average anywhere from $3,500 to $5,500 per incident. So there really is money at stake. Even if you have the ability to get some of your money back, what we have been finding is that a lot of folks do end up losing a couple $1,000s here, a couple $1,000s there, that they are not able to recoup. And as Vlad and I were talking about earlier with his information, in addition to the amount of money, it's also the amount of time and stress that it takes if you are a victim. Now, to kind of just continue to piggyback on these stats here, we know that $43 billion out of this $56 billion was lost due to criminals interacting directly with us, which is really very new and very much different than how a lot of us pictured identity theft. I think a lot of us picture identity theft happening anonymously, where you have no idea your information was compromised and you are not part of the process of giving away that information. But things have changed. The criminals that we are seeing now are a little bit more sophisticated. They're using different technologies, and they're also using our trust in certain technologies against us. And the three most common ways that criminals are interacting with us and getting their hands on our information are robocalls, phishing scams, and using social media. And we're going to cover each of these as we continue to go through the presentation here. But the one stat that I like to share from this slide is that nearly 90% of all data breaches occur, of all breaches occur due to human error. And we don't necessarily share that fact to shame anyone, right? The reason we share that fact is that there's hope. There is hope for us. If we were all just a little bit more educated, if we all put in a few more protections, we could really minimize the number of breaches that are occurring. You know, one of the things we mentioned earlier was that there's not a ton of education within this space. And so we want to be able to educate you, to really make sure that you have the tools that you need so that we can start to reduce the number of breaches, specifically the ones that due to us making simple mistakes with our information. Now, we briefly talked about the number of data breaches that we've experienced, and these are not necessarily the most recent ones by any means, but these were really some of the biggest ones, some of the ones that made the news, some of the ones that had a lot of information compromised, specifically Equifax, where your name, date of birth, address, and social security number were all impacted in that data breach. And we did kind of touch upon it already, but the idea, this world that we're living in now, is not so much a matter of if your information is compromised in one of these data breaches, right? It's more a matter of when, and it's more a matter of being able to defend our information. Even if criminals have some of our personal information, if we put protections in place, they still will not be able to use that information to open up fraudulent accounts. And that's really the goal of this presentation, right? Even if someone has the big four, your name, date of birth, social, and home address, they still can't do damage. They still cannot compromise your information. We have also started to see the number of data breaches oddly decline, which seems really strange to most people who are not following it too closely. And what we've started to see is that there have been definitely less data breaches. The number has dropped. But what we're starting to see is more of a monetization of that data. And what I mean by that is there's been so many different data breaches. There's been so much of our information compromised, right? Name, date of birth, address, social, email address, phone number, where you live, all of these different things have been compromised. And so now what we're starting to see these networks do is really try to uncover new ways in order to monetize the data that they have. And so for us, now is really the time more than ever to start protecting our information, to really double down and make sure that we are as safe as possible, that we are doing everything we need in order to stay safe. We also know that you can be a victim of identity theft regardless of where you are at within the life cycle. So as we are seeing things now today, children are being targeted 10 times more often than adults for their social security number. So it's really important for us to be monitoring and taking care of everyone in our circle, right? Your spouse, of course, your significant other, your kids, your grandkids, any elderly relatives or loved ones that you are taking care of as well. We know that depending upon the age, depending upon your age, where you're at within that life cycle, definitely can impact the types of scams that you are most susceptible to. And so it's important to be aware of where your vulnerabilities are and how you might best protect against those vulnerabilities. And so with that, what I want to start talking about are all of the different things we just need to be in the know about. And the first one, again, is really understanding your vulnerabilities. Regardless of how much technology you're utilizing on a day-to-day basis, you still have vulnerabilities. And I do often hear this at my seminars where there'll always be one client that says, you know what, I don't really have to worry about this because I don't use a lot of technology. And in a sense that could be, I guess, true for certain types of scams. But the reality is you have vulnerabilities no matter what or how much technology you're using. And what we see for some folks that are using less technology, so maybe you don't have a smartphone, or maybe you don't have an internet connection in your house. What we are seeing for some folks that aren't using a lot of technology, the statistics don't indicate that you're more or less likely to be a victim, but what the statistics do tell us is that if you are a victim, you are more likely to have, you are more, or I would say it this way, you are less likely to find out in a short period of time, right? So folks that are using less technology typically it takes them much longer to figure out that something's wrong, to figure out that their information has been compromised. And the biggest reason for that is because they don't have all these checks and balances in place. They're not using a lot of different technology platforms. And so they also haven't been able to see some of the red flags that might be more obvious if you have, for example, your credit card app downloaded onto your phone, if you're doing mobile banking, if you're using peer-to-peer payment systems, right? All of those different types of things can help indicate to you that something is wrong, possibly a little bit sooner. We also know that paper is still a threat. 53% of identity theft is still happening non-digitally. So that's slightly more than half happening outside of your computer, which is hard for a lot of us to picture. Now, for those of you that are not shredding your documents, it's important for you to shred your documents. We know criminals are still going through your mail. They're still going through junkyards and dump sites, and they're still able to find pieces of mail that have your name, your address, and any account numbers associated with that piece of mail. When we talk about shredding your documents, it's best now to get a cross shredder. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them at Walmart. They have very inexpensive ones. The cheapest one I saw on Amazon was an Aurora shredder, and it only shreds 3 pieces of paper at once. But for some of you, that might be plenty, right? Just one envelope at a time. You might not get that much mail. So it'll be nice, quick, and easy for you to dispose of it. If you want to be able to shred more documents at a time, you can spend a little bit more money, and it will allow you to put more through the shredder at once, therefore being a little bit more efficient. Now, the last thing that I will say here is there's this really great new feature that the post office came up with. It's called informed delivery. So if you go on to USPS.com, United States Postal Service, you can select an option called informed delivery. If you select that and turn it on, what it will do is it will email you grayscale images of all of the letters and packages that are scanned in and supposed to be arriving to your door. And what that can do is help spot fraud, right? If you say to yourself, okay, these 3 pieces of mail were supposed to have been delivered, but I only received one of them, right? Now you can at least have a clue. Hey, it was scanned in. Where did it go in between the post office and getting to my mailbox? It will also allow you to put a freeze on your mail. So if, for example, you're going away, you could say, hey, I'm going away from December 1st to December 15th. Please don't deliver my mail. And then on December 16th, they will deliver all of the mail that you would have received over the course of those 2 weeks. It's a great way to make sure that no one's just casually driving by and seeing that your mailbox is piling up. It also means you don't have to ask a friend or neighbor to go and empty out your mailbox for you. So it does give you a bit more flexibility. And again, it's called USPS Informed Delivery. Now, the next option is a site titled, Have I Been Pwned? And it's a very goofy name. If you can get past the name, it does have a lot of value. So if you go to the website, haveibeenpwned.com, it allows you to type in your email address and a phone number. You can run multiple different searches. So if you have multiple email address, multiple phone numbers, don't worry, run a search for each of them. And what it's going to do is after you hit enter, it's going to show you all of the data breaches that your information has been compromised in. Now, I will say I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing this for about 4 years, and I was completely shocked by the number of data breaches that I was a victim of. There was about 15 on there, and I had really only been aware that I had been impacted in about 4 or 5. So I would encourage you to run this search. After you run the search, it's going to give you a little dialog box like the one you see here on the screens. This is just one example, but it's going to tell you the data breach. And then it's also going to give you a bit of information about the breach. So in this one, it says in 2016, LinkedIn had 164 million email addresses and passwords compromised. So what that tells me is that I now need to immediately go onto my LinkedIn and change my password. Even though this happened in 2016, it doesn't matter. If you're still using that password, it's a risk. If you're using that password on any other account other than LinkedIn, you also need to change the password on those accounts as well. What we know is that a lot of criminals are selling and reselling these data sets. So what that means is that people are going on to different sites. If they believe that they've found your password, they're going to site after site after site after site, and they're just trying to see if they can log in. So if you're using your LinkedIn password for other accounts and they happen to try, they might just get lucky enough. So it's important to change that password if it's been compromised. You can no longer use it moving forward. Now, the next item here is phishing and smishing. Now, phishing is basically a fake email that you will get. Smishing is really just a fake text message. So an SMS message, that's where the name comes from. But that does oftentimes confuse people. There's really no difference in what they're trying to accomplish. It's just how they're getting in touch with you. And we've seen phishing and smishing incidents increase 500% since the start of the pandemic. So all of us have received multiple phishing attempts, probably just this week alone. And so what's really important to know about phishing is that these emails look really sophisticated. They look exactly how they're supposed to, right? They look exactly as if they're coming from Netflix, Amazon, Apple, Capital One, Marriott, right? These are some of the more common ones that you see where you'll get emails, even sometimes when you don't have accounts at some of those places. And what's the most important thing to know here is that you must always go directly to the source. Now, what I mean by that is these emails are looking more and more real. So you can see they'll have the Netflix logo. And there might be some instances in that email that give it away to you, right? So in the Netflix example, I know it's kind of small, but if you looked at the email address of where it came from, it's just kind of a combination of random numbers, letters, and characters. It's just gibberish, right? And so that's kind of my first indication that this didn't really come from Netflix. Another indication is an immediate call to action. Hey, you must act now, immediately. It's important, it's critical. Another is if there are grammar or misspellings or the tenses of words are off. And we see that happen a lot of times where they'll put it through a translator and the translator won't exactly convert it to English, the same way that a company that is domiciled in the US proofreading their emails before it goes out to clients would be written. So again, there are oftentimes clues within these emails to say to yourself, hey, this doesn't really seem right. But if you don't want to become a phishing detective, the safest thing to do is to not rely on information that comes in emails. So what I mean by that, if Netflix is telling you, hey, you need to update your payment details, instead of just doing it right through that email, you say to yourself, okay, well, I don't trust this email. So instead, I'm going to call Netflix, right? Or I'm going to go onto my Netflix account and see which credit card they have on file, right? So just if you can remember, go directly to the source. If you think the email is fake, everything in that email is fake, all of that contact information. So you need to get to the source through a different medium, right? Flip your credit card over, call the number on the back, go to a website, log into that account, right? All of those things will help make sure that you don't fall victim to phishing. And as a last resort, we have this one-page phishing and smishing scams that we put together that really just point out all of the different things to look for, some of the red flags, and we can get this out to you so that you can study up and become experts so that you never ever make any mistakes by clicking on links or attachments in an email. Okay, the next item here is our smartphones. Now, our smartphones are collecting a ton of information on us. And to be honest, they are telling us what they are collecting. They tell us in their user agreement. The problem is we just don't read the user agreements, so we don't really know exactly what they're collecting. But we do have some examples on the slide here. Majority of the apps that you download onto your device are collecting your name, age, gender, political leanings, your GPS data, so where you're going, how often, do you have any patterns, your browsing habits. They're tracking information from your accelerometer, which tracks how many steps you're taking, how often do you get up and walk around, are you traveling, how fast are you moving, access to your camera, your location, your audio, your call logs, your text messages, your flashlight app, right? Pretty much anything and everything they are tracking. And what they're doing is they're taking all of that information, they're packaging it up, and they're selling it to data brokers. What these data brokers do is they then turn around and they go to different companies and they say, hey, we have a list that would be great for you to use for advertising, right? So I'll give you an example. Maybe they have a list of men between the ages of 18 to 40, right? And they are saying, hey, we know that this group of men specifically really enjoys football. So they're going to go to all of the different companies that make money off of football, and they're going to say, hey, we can sell you this massive list of all of these men in your area, in your age range, that are interested in football. And so companies will say, oh, great, I would love to have more targeted advertising. And in simple terms, it doesn't seem like it's anything that devastating. But what's happening is these data brokers operate largely unregulated, and they sell your data to pretty much whoever is willing to pay for it. And we've seen instances of these data brokers selling information to bail bondsmen, selling information to foreign countries, right? Selling information, again, to anyone that's willing to pay for the data. And so for us as consumers, what that means is we need to start being more responsible about the information that we're sharing. And there's a couple of ways to do that. There's really three main ways to do it. The first is to take control of your location services. On your app, all of us have the ability to get a list of all of the apps that we are sharing our location with. So if you have an iPhone, you can go to settings, privacy, and then click on the first one. It's actually not highlighted in red on this slide. It's just right above it, which says location services. That's going to give you a full list of all of the apps that you are sharing your location with. Go through that list. If that application does not really need access to your location, don't give it access, right? If it doesn't need it, don't share it. The second way to prevent this from happening is to disable your data tracking. Now, the slide that's up on the screen here, these are the steps to disable data tracking. This is only available on iPhones. And this also isn't a perfect solve. What this is saying is that no longer can apps track you outside of their app, but they can still track you inside of their app. So if you want to turn this on, you go to privacy, tracking, and then tap that little green icon and turn it to gray in order to turn it on. Now, the next item here is, or I would say the last item would be to utilize a VPN. That's going to be a really safe way to make sure that you're not exchanging data for the sake of allowing someone else to sell it. Now, a VPN is a virtual private network. Basically, what it does is it encrypts your internet traffic. It encrypts what you're doing on the internet. So therefore, no one can see what you're looking at, No one can see where your computer is located, and no one can see who you are. So a lot of your browsing habits, a lot of these data points that companies are taking, they're not eligible to get them when you're using a VPN, because it's basically blocked. It's basically putting your internet traffic into a tunnel and then not allowing anyone to breach that tunnel. Now, VPNs used to be pretty expensive, but over the past few years, they've actually become pretty affordable. There's a company out there called Surfshark, and they offer 2 years of a VPN for $60. Most of the companies are $100 for the year. And there are some more that you might be a little familiar with. I know Norton has a NordVPN, and there are a couple of companies that you're probably use. McAfee has one as well. So a lot of the virus protection companies will offer VPNs. And again, they're about $100 a year. The next items I want to cover are the different accounts we need to monitor. And the first is going to be our social media accounts. It's critically important to be aware that when you are posting on social media, you are posting on a public forum. You are posting on the internet. The internet is forever. So when you share every bit of information about yourself, it is out there. We share way too much on our social media sites. Most of us have our birthdays on there. The year of your birthday should not be on any social media account. Your social media accounts should absolutely be private. Unless you are some type of influencer, there is no reason why you should have a public profile where just anyone can see your pictures and what you're posting. And most importantly, the other people that you are friends with on those social media networks. It's also important that you have a strong password. I know that we don't typically think that much damage can be done by social media, but this year alone has proven that to be insanely false. We are seeing some huge sums of money being lost due to social media. You are 30% more likely to be a victim of identity theft if you have a social media profile. So please, please, please take a look at your profiles. Do not tag your locations. Create a strong password, and do not accept and believe anything you hear simply because it's coming from a picture of someone on the internet, right? Anyone and everyone can create a profile. They can copy pictures. They can imitate and become anyone they want on the internet. Don't believe it just because they have a picture that looks familiar. The next item here are your credit cards. Now, we won't spend too much time here, but just be aware that your credit card more than likely has an app associated with it. And if it doesn't have an app, you can absolutely access a ton of features from the website. And a lot of those features are security features. One of the most important features is to include real-time transactions. Now, what I recommend is setting a limit. You can get a notification every single time your card is swiped. But if you're swiping that card a couple times a day, or if maybe you have the same card for your spouse and you don't want to get all of those notifications, you can set it up for a dollar amount, right? So you can say every time my card is swiped for more than $50 or more than $100 or more than $500, whatever you want. But you could say every time my card is swiped for more than that amount of money, I want to be notified, right? I want to get a notification. And the reason that this helps is because you can then see in real time if fraud has occurred. And if fraud has occurred, the faster you get to it, the faster you deal with it, the less likely you are to lose money because of that breach. So again, don't be afraid to check out the privacy features of your credit cards, enable some of them, and really start to monitor these accounts on a regular basis instead of doing it once a month when your statement comes. The next item here are your credit reports. If you are concerned, suspicious, or even just curious as to whether or not someone has opened fraudulent accounts in your name, it's best to just pull your credit report. Your credit report is your financial transcript. It has every single line of credit that you have ever opened, whether it's closed or still currently open today. So if someone has compromised your information, it's absolutely going to be on your credit report. Now, each and every single one of us are entitled to 3 free credit reports per calendar year. One from Experian, one from TransUnion, one from Equifax. So we can go on to the website that you see on the slide here, www.annualcreditreport.com, and you can pull your credit reports every 4 months, right? Space it out across the year. So maybe go on in January or February, pull your Experian report, make sure everything on there is accurate, it's correct, it's something you're responsible for. Then wait 4 months, so maybe April, May, June timeframe, summer, right? Go on and pull your TransUnion credit report. Make sure nothing has changed. Then go ahead, wait another 4 months, so September, October timeframe. Go on and pull your last credit report from Equifax. Make sure nothing has changed. And you can do this every 4 months free of charge and make sure that your information has not been compromised. The last account to monitor is going to be your peer-to-peer payment apps. And there are a lot of them out there at this point. There's Apple Pay, there's Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, Cash App, Chimeo. There are an endless number of apps, and they're really great if I'm being honest, right? They allow you to send money seamlessly, quickly, easily. When you go out to dinner, you can pay someone for exactly what you owe them. You don't have to worry about having cash and getting change. So they do have a great efficiency to them. They are also safe in terms of using 256-bit encryption, which is the standard in financial industry. So in a way, they are safe. What we are seeing as to why they are not safe is user error. People are not using these apps appropriately. They are making silly mistakes. Some of these apps are not associated with any bank, and that's important to know. Because they are not FDIC insured, if you send money to the wrong person, you're just out of luck. The only way to get that money back is if the person you sent it to is just kind enough to send it back to you. And I'm not so sure that any of us really want to play or take that risk, right? Depends on the amount of money, but even I might not send back a certain amount of money if it just plopped into my account, right? So we really want to make sure we're sending it to the right people. A lot of apps now will say, okay, type in the last 4 digits of their phone number or type in their email address. Don't skip that step. That step is in there to make sure you're not sending money to the wrong person. Also, make sure you keep your transactions private. It's crazy that we even have to say this, but you would never share your bank statement online for anyone to view. Don't share your Venmo or your PayPal, right? Now I can see who you're paying, how much you're paying them on a regular basis. So if I was creative enough, I could go in, I'll just steal your little picture, right? And I'll create a Venmo, that's Christina Cuffari, and I'm just going to request money from all the people that you request money from on a regular basis, right? And they're going to assume it's you because it's your picture. Why wouldn't they? So make sure you're keeping your transactions private for your sake, but also for the people you care about as well. Last thing here, make sure you have a strong password. This is a financial account. This needs to be a different password than all of your other accounts. It needs to be safe. It needs to be strong. It needs to be different than the password that you're using as your touch or face ID to get into your phone, right? Because if you leave your phone somewhere and I can figure out what your 4-digit PIN is, I can wire myself endless amounts of money without ever needing to compromise your information, right? All I needed to do was have your phone. Okay, so let's start talking about the ways that we can defend. And we touched upon this a little bit, but I really want to spend some more time here. And that's really on passwords. Passwords are your number one line of defense. It's important to create strong passwords. We know a lot of criminals are using algorithms to guess our passwords. So it can crack. Well, I will say this, they've gotten very sophisticated. So an algorithm can crack a 4-digit PIN in less than 1 minute. It can crack a 6-digit PIN in less than an hour. And the reason for that is because when you're only using numbers, there's only so many possibilities of what that password could be, which is why it's important to increase the number of possibilities. So the password that you see down here at the bottom, jelly22fish-10, it would take the algorithm 150 years to guess this particular password. And that's because it's using numbers, it's using upper and lowercase letters, and it's using special characters. That's increasing the number of possibilities of what that password could be, which in turn makes it safer and more secure. That's why every time you go to a website, it asks you to create a password that has numbers, upper and lowercase letters, and special characters. It's for your protection. Make sure you are creating different passwords for all of your important accounts. I know for some of us, we say, well, I can't remember all of them. Use a password storage application if you can't remember them. And the reason why this is your best option is because these password storage applications are password protected and they're encrypted. Most of the other places we keep our passwords are not password protected, right? A sheet of paper on our desk, the notes application on our phone, an Excel workbook, none of those things are typically password protected and none of those things are encrypted. So using a password storage application, one, means that you'll always have your passwords because we always have our phones. 2, that it's password protected, and 3, that it's encrypted. It's going to be the safest option. I will agree, once you take your passwords out of your memory, they instantly become less secure. But there's really very few of us that can remember 20 different passwords if we're setting strong, secure passwords. So password application is going to be your best course of action. Multi-factor authentication, I won't spend too much time here, but just know that it is one of the safest ways to log into your accounts. And it's really just in the name. Instead of just using a username and password, they're using multi-factors to authenticate you. So they're using a username and password, which is something you know. Then they're using a PIN number that you have to enter, which is going to be something you have. And in order to get that PIN number, it's going to come through your phone, which is password protected with your touch or face ID, which is something you are. So it's using 3 different layers. If someone were to compromise your information using multi-factor, they'd have to know your username, your password. Then they'd also have to have your phone in their possession during that 60-second window when that PIN is texted or called to you. That is why multi-factor is so much safer. And if you have the option to use it, you should always elect to use it because it will keep your accounts safer than just using a username and password. There's also credit monitoring services that you can pay for. So these are services like LifeLock and Triple Alert, and they monitor your credit report for you on a daily basis. So what we talked about earlier, pulling it every 4 months, you wouldn't have to worry about that if you had credit monitoring services because they're watching every single day. And they won't allow you to open up a new account unless you give them permission and say, yes, I am trying to open up that account. They typically cost about $20 to $30 a month, but before you pay for them, make sure you can't get it somewhere else for free first. And what I mean by that is a lot of employers offer it as part of their employees benefits plan. A lot of banks offer it if you have a certain type of credit card or a certain type of account. And then lastly, if you were a victim of any major data breach, typically as part of a consequence for that data breach, they are required to pay for your credit monitoring services. So to give you an example, if you were impacted by the Equifax data breach, you are entitled to 10 free years of credit monitoring services from Equifax. So again, if you were impacted by that, which 85% of Americans were, you would have the ability to enjoy credit monitoring services for the next 10 years without having to pay for them. Last item here, freezing your credit. This is probably going to be the new normal moving forward. It's going to be the safest thing that you can do to prevent identity theft. While your credit is frozen, nobody, including yourself, can open up new lines of credit. Personally, I think the new normal moving forward will be people will just freeze their credit, leave it frozen until they need to take out new lines of credit. Then they can figure out which credit bureau, they could unfreeze that credit, take out that line, and then go ahead and freeze it again. You can freeze and unfreeze your credit as many times as you need. It's free of charge. It typically takes 24 to 48 hours to freeze it, 24 to 48 hours to unfreeze it. So you can lock and unlock as many times. When you freeze your credit, it's important to freeze it at all 3 credit bureaus, because if you only freeze it at 1 or 2 of the 3 major credit bureaus, then someone can still open up lines of credit using whichever credit bureau you have not frozen your credit at. And the last thing that I will say here is they will give you a PIN number when you freeze your credit. This is a very important confirmation or PIN number, probably the most important one you will ever receive, because they will not allow you to unfreeze your credit unless you provide to them that confirmation number they gave you when you initially froze it. And remember, you'll have 3 of them, right? 1 from Experian, 1 from TransUnion, and 1 from Equifax. Keep those 3 PIN numbers in a safe location so that you can quickly and easily freeze and unfreeze your credit whenever you need. If you lose that PIN number, they will require you to mail in a copy of your birth certificate, your license, and your social security card, which is, a whole identity disaster in and of itself. So just make sure you keep that in a safe place so that it doesn't take you an extra amount of time and effort to unfreeze your credit. But with that, we are at the end of my prepared remarks here. So what I wanted to do was just freeze and really give anyone on the line here the ability to ask any questions if they had any. So I'll go ahead and freeze. If you're muted, feel free to unmute. If you don't want to unmute, feel free to use the chat and we can answer some questions that way, whatever you think is most convenient.
I do have to say, I thought I was pretty versed in this, and Christina, I was taking down notes, and obviously in preparation to this meeting, and more particularly after this, I also became aware that, we either use iPhones or Samsung phones in this particular environment, right? On an iPhone, there's a password setting. You can click on that, and there's security recommendation, which Apple on your behalf kind of lets you know the websites you log into. And obviously 99% of us use our phones to log in and view various information. And it's just shocking, right? Data breach, or you reuse passwords, and like you said, it's pretty mind-blowing when desperate times call for desperate measures, and people from overseas are seeing the way we live our life and trying to get into every one of our bank accounts and get some sort of information on us. Absolutely shocking. Anyway, let's see if I have any questions. And if you don't, please, by all means, feel free to reach out to us. I mean, this is why we're putting this all together for everybody.
Yeah, if there are questions that come in afterwards, of course, just forward them over to Ben and myself, or Ben and he can get them to me. But if we have some questions that come in after the fact, of course, we can get them answered for any of your clients that have some after the fact as well. And I'll have Ben send you this little phishing piece that I referenced. So that is client approved. So feel free. I know not all of your clients are obviously able to make it in the middle of the day, but if you want to kind of send that out as well, we can get that over to you.
Correct. Terrific. Christina, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And until we meet again, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.